This video is sponsored by Normandy1998, Christopher Mitchell, 212th Trooper, and Silas 1610, and brought to you by Christopher Mitchell, who requested this topic. If there is a video you want me to make, just head over to Patreon or become a channel member and select the Pickle Producer tier, since among other benefits, you will get a video request every month, be it the continuation of an existing series or a brand new story. Also, while I have you, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel, since it costs you nothing and really helps the channel grow. But with that out of the way, let's get on with the story. We pick up with Team Tennyson a few days after their battle with the Rooters and the seeming death of Gorvin, while the trio have resumed their usual work, which means long hours of looking over computer screens, and even longer drives to remote areas to stop DNA aliens from installing weather towers. There has been an unmistakable lightness that Ben has injected into each of these mundane activities, cracking jokes and being happy to come along on these milk runs, since after so long he finally has the Omnitrix back, and is eager to show off just how valuable a member of the team he can be. While Gwen and Kevin are both happy for him and glad that he's no longer in that mopey mood he'd get in when he couldn't fight DNA aliens, Kevin is also worried that he might do something stupid, remembering all too well what it feels like to get high off a rapid influx of power. However, here Gwen comes to her cousin's defense, stating that Ben's really matured these last few years, so she has faith in him, with this causing the black-haired boy to chuckle, since it seems not so long ago their roles were reversed, and it was Ben defending him from her. Though smiling a little, Gwen replies that things are different now, and they've both matured a lot too. All of a sudden, Kevin's plumber uniform feels very hot, or maybe it's this room, with the young Osmosian quickly turning back to the computer and bringing up what he thinks is their usual scanner, though in his flustered state it's actually the badge tracker, with it coming as a minor shock when he sees that his isn't the only plumber badge in range. There's also one not too far from here. Figuring this might be back up against the Highbreed invasion, Kevin tries to radio them over the badge's comm, though when this fails he rallies the others, telling them to get in the car, since they need to rendezvous with this mystery plumber ASAP. However, to their surprise, when they arrive at the coordinates, they don't see any aliens who might be their contact, instead finding a normal human highway. Figuring that maybe this plumber is wearing an ID mask to blend in, Ben, Gwen, and Kevin all begin looking around, with it being good they do, as suddenly Ben spots a disoriented looking girl stumble onto the road, and more pressingly, into the path of an oncoming truck. Knowing he doesn't have time to dial up a hero, nor risk getting one who lacks the speed he requires, he instead yells for Gwen, with the redhead deftly summoning a mana whip and pulling the stranger to safety. Mercifully, this saves the dazed girl's life, and as Gwen goes to check on her, Kevin lets out a low whistle, praising that she's gotten pretty good with all her magic stuff. From behind them, another smoother voice concurs, saying that he's never been so impressed in all his life, with the trio turning to see a handsome young man with blonde hair and a scarf, who introduces himself as Michael Morningstar. Having an immediate bad feeling about this guy, Kevin tells Mike that they've got this covered so he can move along. Though smiling softly, the blonde boy explains that this girl, Trina, goes to school with him, so he came to try and help her when he saw her stumble, though luckily the hero Ben Tennyson was on the scene. This earns slightly puzzled looks from the trio, with Ben asking if he and Michael know each other, though letting out a small chuckle. The other boy admits that he hasn't had the honor, but he's been a big fan of him and his exploits for years. This only increases Kevin's bad feeling, as generally the only ones who know Ben's identity are bad guys after the Omnitrix, though due to still being on Cloud 9, Ben comes to a much more optimistic conclusion, taking Kevin's badge from the dash of his car and activating the badge tracker, with this confirming his hunch a moment later, as the mystery plumber badge they came here to find is in Michael's possession. At once, Gwen's guard lowers as Ben's has, since if he has that badge then he must be an ally, though Kevin is unconvinced, asking where he got it, since he doesn't remember seeing him at the academy. Still chuckling, Michael admits that it's part of a collection of alien technology his family has acquired over the years, with this having previously belonged to his father who gave it to him, in which he has held onto as a keepsake ever since. Recognizing that it is at least plausible his dad was a plumber too, the young Osmosian does not press the issue any further, instead accepting Mike's invite to see their collection, if for no other reason than he's curious to see what alien tech they have. However, it seems Michael will have to meet them there, as he has a gentlemanly duty to escort Trina home first, with the blonde boy casually taking on a bright glow before flying off with the girl. Meanwhile, Team Tennyson make their way to Morningstar Manor, where they are met by Michael once again, with him showing them around. While not as impressive as the stuff they have back at base, Kevin does have to admit that whoever curated this stuff knew the real deal from the junk, since there's not a single piece of fake alien tech here which dealers often try to pawn off on gullible humans who don't know better, so maybe his family really are plumbers. Meanwhile, Michael has been doing some examining of his own, namely of, as he calls her, lovely Gwen, as he continues to gush over her magical acumen, with this only increasing when he sees the keystone on her wrist, as even at a glance he can sense how powerful it is. However, before he can question her on it, or Kevin can question him, a power surge casts them all into darkness, with Michael explaining that this is highly irregular, since there's a power plant nearby, so something must be going on there. Figuring this must be D and aliens, Ben urges his friends to come on, with even Michael tagging along since he wants to help, though to their collective surprise, when they arrive at the power plant, they see not D and aliens, but a group of withered-looking girls in the same uniforms as Trina, who immediately turn hostile upon spotting them. In spite of the dire situation, Ben can't help but smile, since this means it's hero time, with him activating the Omnitrix and flipping through the holographic display until he finds a bumpy, bulky-looking guy who he figures is probably his new forearm. Slapping the dial back into its housing unit, he feels himself transform, while once again the new data dump function gets him up to speed with his species and its abilities, so that as he steps forward to battle, he declares himself Cannonbolt. However, as he's been made aware, stepping is really not where this alien excels, a fact he demonstrates by curling into a ball and rolling towards a few of the attackers at high speed. Due to being humans, they are easily bowled over, with Kevin grinning that he likes this new guy before delivering a metal-laden punch to one of their assailants, while Gwen and Michael combine their powers to fire a ray of mana that takes out the rest. Honestly, Ben is a little disappointed with how easy this was as a fight, as he barely got to try out his new alien, though when he transforms back to human to regroup with the others, he has to admit that Michael definitely made a good addition to the team. Smiling gratefully, the blonde states that he hopes this means he did well enough for his tryout to officially join their squad, though here Kevin speaks up, stating that he can't deputize him as a plumber if that's what he's asking, since he doesn't have the authority to do that. But they will call on him if they need help busting up more DNA aliens, with this seeming good enough for Michael, who proposes that he have lovely Gwen over for dinner to celebrate, and perhaps discuss further ways in which they could synergize their abilities to work together. For a moment, Gwen seems to hesitate, as her eyes briefly flick back to Kevin, since she had always thought he would be the first to ask her out, having seemingly had feelings for her for a long time, but maybe that all changed when he went into space. Not to mention, since meeting Michael, she's felt this lightheaded rush when she's around him that's unlike anyone she's ever known. So why shouldn't she see where things go with him, rather than waiting around for something that might not even happen? Having done this mental calculus in under a second, she then looks back to Michael and smiles that she'd love to, with the pair then setting off for Morningstar Manor once more, while Ben and a very sour-faced Kevin get back in the car. Recognizing this, Ben decides to cut through the tension and flatly asks why his best friend's letting her go since it's obvious he's not okay with this. And while at first Kevin tries to obfuscate and shut this down, Ben refuses to give up, with this eventually forcing the ruffian to admit that maybe he does like Gwen, but he doesn't know if she feels the same, and it could mess up the mission if she doesn't. And besides, there's never any time to talk about that kind of stuff with everything going on. Knowing Kevin better than to believe that, Ben retorts that maybe he's just scared to get his heart broken, since time really is an issue when they spend pretty much every free second together, so it wouldn't be too hard to slip in 5 extra words. Hey Gwen, wanna go out? Growing rather frustrated, Kevin warns Tennyson that if he doesn't drop it, he's gonna hit him. Though, holding up his watch, the brunette smirks that'll give him a chance to test out some more new aliens. Though, as Kevin sees himself reflected in the watch's dial, with the black portion giving his reflection a grade complexion, he has a horrific epiphany and pulls a sharp U-turn, as he growls that he's just figured out what all those zombie girls have in common, so they gotta go get Gwen away from Morningstar before it's too late. Meanwhile, back at the manor, Michael has made his intentions very clear, as he professes that lovely Gwen is the only girl he'll ever need. Though this is meant in the vampiric sense, as he has his horde of zombie girls hold her down while he attempts to satiate his hunger for energy by consuming all she has. However, as he is about to learn, she is more than he can handle, quite literally, as with the keystone amplifying her mana, she is able to overpower the connection he has formed between them and reverse the polarity, taking back not only what he stole from her, but from the other girls too, so that they are returned to their normal state. As for Michael, he is left a husk of his former self, having lost his glowing gold energy and his radiant looks, instead resembling a desiccated corpse. To the vain young man, this is a fate worse than death, though it seems fate isn't done with him yet, as before his victims can round on him and extract their vengeance, Ben and Kevin arrive, with the latter placing Morningstar under arrest. In spite of his condition, Michael retains his haughtiness, sneering that none of his crimes are under plumber jurisdiction, though sneering right back, Kevin retorts that he's pretty sure he saw some level 3 or higher tech among Mikey's little stash, and considering Earth's only a level 2 world, he can expect an extended stay in lockup. With this, he coats his hand in steel and shifts into a pair of cuffs, since Morningstar would just absorb the energy ones, before slapping them on the scumbag's wrist and leading him out to the car, while smirking that he might have to stuff him in the trunk so he doesn't try and get away while he's driving. However, before this can become anything more than a threat, Gwen approaches the boys, though her eyes are purely locked on Kevin, as she comments that coming back for her was his idea, wasn't it? A little testily, Ben protests that he could have been worried about her, though ignoring this entirely, the redhead instead waits for Kevin to respond, with the scruffy Osmosian giving a slightly awkward grunt of "yeah" that makes Gwen smile as she steps away from him. However, it seems that Gwen and Kevin are not the only ones for whom love is in the air, as after watching his classmate Julie Yamamoto win a challenging tennis match, Ben decides to ask her out, albeit with more than a little playful prodding from Kevin, who is quick to remind him of how easy he said it was to ask a girl out, while at his side Gwen just gives the pair confused and unamused looks. Nonetheless, Ben does find the courage, with Julie being delighted to accept, so that a plan is made for them to visit the pier that evening. Fortunately, here Kevin is happy to volunteer his services as chauffeur without much teasing, having gotten his fill already, and being glad his pal hasn't entirely lost the normal life Max wanted to safeguard for him now that he's back to heroing. Unfortunately, as is always the way for Ben, something abnormal is just around the corner, as in the forest a small ways away, a galvanic mechamorph named Bazel is trapped in his crashed ship, and so has dispatched a piece of himself to seek help, with this small, more animalistic creature tracking the nearest plumber badge, which in this case is the Omnitrix. Meanwhile, the watch has begun emitting a loud, high-pitched beeping as part of Bazel's distress call, which unfortunately Ben does not understand, and more unfortunately, is not at all helping with his date, as he hastily excuses himself to try and stop this, as the last thing he needs is some alien messing things up with Julie. Sadly, this is exactly what happens, as at that moment the little Mechamorph finds its target, and being unable to speak, it attempts to get Ben's attention by merging with a bumper car and chasing him down. Mistaking this for an attack, Ben leads the runaway car on something of a wild chase that ultimately culminates in him tricking into crashing into a pole, though by the time he finishes and returns to Julie, she is on the verge of leaving, having feared she'd been stood up. Thankfully, Ben is able to salvage this with a bit of silliness as he turns his teeth blue with cotton candy, and then proposes they check out the rides. However, this just means more machines for the Mechamorph to merge with, as this time it transforms into a fighter jet ride, upgrading it and making it an actual plane that begins straining against the ride in an attempt to chase Ben down again. Knowing he'll need to become an alien if he wants to deal with his persistent pain, the brunette once more tries to make an excuse before shoving Julie into a porta potty. Then, once he's sure she won't see him, he pops the dial and prepares to transform. Unfortunately, just before he can slam it back down, the Mechamorph manages to escape, shaking the pier and causing Ben's choice to be shifted by one, so that what he becomes is a cerebro-crustacean. Letting out a groan as his run-ins with Savantis have given him a less than rosy view of this species, Ben names this new transformation Brainstorm, then making use of this form's heightened intellect, devises a plan to incapacitate it with the innate cerebro-crustacean bioelectricity. However, this isn't all he puts his big brain towards, as while this may be a temporary solution, he needs something more permanent, and having recognized the nuisance as a Mechamorph, it occurs to him to request Kevin's help, since he has experience dealing with troublesome members of that species considering his friendship with malware. To this end, instead of trying to drive the Mechamorph away, Ben instead stuns her with his electrokinesis, forcing him to abandon the plane and lie on the pier as a puddle of techno-organic goo. This buys him enough time to revert to normal and call Kevin, who is thankfully not too far away, and so is able to get there before the Mechamorph awakens, albeit by committing a couple of traffic violations. Thanks to his time at the Plumber Academy, Kevin immediately recognizes this as a Mechamorph symbiont, meaning the rest of him, not it, must be out there somewhere. Glad to see that someone understands his purpose at last, the little Mechamorph then begins leading the boys back into the forest, with Ben growing steadily more antsy as he really should be getting back to his date, though Kevin tells him to relax, having taken a shine to the techno-organic creature and wanting to help. Subsequently, it is not long before they reach Bazel's ship, where Kevin is quick to point out the reactor core which has started counting down to self-destruction, meaning they have to act fast if they want to save the trapped alien. Due to a force field being active, the scruffy Osmosian takes the lead here, coating himself in rock and then using the extra protection to push himself through and tear the core from its housing. Then, when the field comes down, Ben switches back into Brainstorm and uses his electrokinesis to grab the core and launch it high into space just before it explodes. Recognizing how close they came to disaster, the best friends high-five, showing that nothing can beat their teamwork, though they are not done yet. Far from it, as after removing the debris trapping Bazel, they are able to speak with the Mechamorph directly, who explains his situation and demands that Kevin as an actual plumber help him repair his ship. Though the scruffy hybrid is no fan of being talked down to by some pompous techno-snot, this is his job, and so with some assistance from Ben, he sets to work, showing his skill as a mechanic, as it takes half the time it took in canon to get Bazel up and in the air again. As the Mechamorph prepares to take flight, Kevin questions what he intends to do with the symbiont, though waving a hand dismissively, Bazel tells him to keep it. Then, without a word of thanks, he blasts off, with the boy sincerely hoping they never cross paths with him again. Together, the now trio begin making their way back to the pier, though having been gone several hours, Julie is unsurprisingly gone when Ben goes to check on her, causing the brunette to hang his head and moan that he can't believe he blew it so hard with that date. Patting him on the back, Kevin admits that he may have lost his shot at a girlfriend, but he got a new pet, so it all works out in the end. A sentiment the younger boy most assuredly does not agree with, though all the same when Kevin offers him a ride home so he doesn't have to walk, he begrudgingly accepts. In the wake of this, the little Mechamorph, or as Ben names him, Ship, due to that being the sound he makes, becomes a fixture of the base, with his dog-like nature adding a playfulness that makes the place feel more like a home. Additionally, Kevin begins spending more and more time there to the point where it could be considered his primary residence, and while officially he claims this is to make sure there's always someone on call, Ben and Gwen come to suspect that it's so Ship isn't left alone, especially since he tends to be the one who dotes on the symbiont the most, feeding him metal filings and playing with him during downtime. In other good news, Gwen informs Ben that her brother Ken will be coming home from college in a few days' time, with this exciting the boy who has always looked up to his big cousin. Having only met the older Tennyson in passing a couple of times, Kevin doesn't really get what the fuss is all about, though all the same he promises to pick up the slack if the pair want to hang out with Ken while he's back in Bellwood. But therein lies the rub, as Ken never arrives in Bellwood, with Gwen and her family quickly growing concerned since when they try to call him they get no response, while all his friends can tell them is that he apparently broke down in a little town called Santa Mira. Fearing this might be something larger than simple tardiness since it's been 2 days with no word, Gwen implores Kevin to take them to Santa Mira, a request he grants without hesitation when he sees how upset this is making her, with him, Ben and Gwen all piling into his car and making haste. When they arrive, they find the place to be a dreary, rainy little burg whose populace seem rather uncooperative, as any request for direction to the nearest garage is met with the unhelpful statement that they have 5 of them in town. Thankfully, by driving around, they do eventually find one, and after looking inside, they spot Ken's car, the Awesome Mobile. Seeing as how no one's around to let them in, Kevin surreptitiously turns his hand into metal and crushes the lock, with the trio stepping inside and examining the car for any hint of where Ken might have gone. While they find no trace of the young man, Kevin does discover a fuel projector on the engine block, meaning someone with access to alien tech intentionally sabotaged the car. At that moment, the owners of the garage make their presence known, with them being none too happy with the young intruders as they demand to know what these 3 kids think they're doing. Not having time to be hauled off to a small-town sheriff's office for trespassing, Kevin attempts to talk his way out of this situation. Though, partway through his first sentence, a crack of lightning causes the mechanic's ID masks to falter, briefly showing D and aliens underneath. In an instant, the plan changes, as figuring they must have something to do with Ken's disappearance, Kevin coats himself fully in metal and prepares to fight, while Gwen likewise readies mana in her hands. Though fearing these infiltrators will be no use for their knocked out, Ben devises a different strategy, and so activating the Omnitrix, he flips to an alien he's been reluctant to use and hits the button. Suddenly, all hostility leaves the D and aliens as they adopt postures of deference and reverence, and as Kevin and Gwen turn around to see why, they are shocked to find Ben in the form of a Highbreed. For once, he does not cry out his new alien's name, as all the ones he thinks of disgust him. In fact, he feels at least faint disgust towards everything but himself right now, though he feels particular disgust towards the D and aliens, as the Highbreed's sense of superiority over the creatures melds with Ben's existing dislike. In an imperious tone, he demands they tell him where the human who owns this vehicle is, as well as their plans, with a pair of underlings immediately submitting, as they reveal they are based in the nearby fish hatchery, which has another weather tower and a Highbreed commander, with that being where they brought the human boy to use him as bait to draw in the plumber Max Tennyson, who has been causing trouble. At this news that they would stoop so low as to use and target his family like that, Ben lets out a roar of fury as he bats the D and aliens into a wall where they slump unconscious. While looking at him with expressions of worry, Gwen and Kevin urge him to calm down. Having enough sense to recognize this must be a side effect of the transformation, kinda like Ghost Freak, Ben reverts to normal and admits that he doesn't like that form at all. Unfortunately, it seems that you'll have to use it again quite soon, as after tying up the DNA aliens and swiping their ID masks, the team make their way up to the hatchery, where Gwen and Kevin disguise themselves as DNA aliens to pass unnoticed, while Ben reluctantly becomes a hybrid again to ensure no one challenges them. For the most part, this works, until Gwen spots something that sickens her to her stomach, a half-DNA alienified Ken among the workforce. Desperately, she tries to speak to her brother, to ask him what these monsters did to him, though in doing so she gives herself away, with Ken and the other DNA aliens immediately attacking her as they cannot allow outsiders to interfere with the master plan. Naturally, Ben and Kevin back Gwen up, with Ben swatting the minions like flies, while Kevin absorbs power from a nearby circuit box and uses that to stun those Ben can't get, freeing Gwen up to bind her brother with mana ropes since she doesn't want to hurt him. When it's just the three of them and Ken left standing, Kevin tries to pull the Xenocide off him, figuring maybe since he hasn't fully transformed this will reverse the process, though this only ends up hurting him, forcing Ben to de-transform and step in, as he protests that it isn't working. As if in response to this, the Omnitrix does something it's never done before and speaks up, stating that it detects significant damage done to Ken's DNA, though it can repair it. Figuring things can't get much worse, Ben agrees, with this having the desired result of neutralizing the Xenocide bonded to his cousin, so that as Ken looks up, he is himself again. Letting out a sigh of relief, Gwen hugs her brother, though in that moment, he feels that he hardly deserves it, as he urgently confesses how he betrayed Grandpa Max when the old man came for him, how he gave him over to the Highbreed, and how he has to make it right. Reassuringly, Ben and Gwen tell him it wasn't his fault, it was the Xenocide controlling him, though when he still insists on helping them, Kevin grins that he understands what his best pal sees in this guy, since he's pretty cool. Together, the three Tennysons and Kevin then proceed into the heart of the base, albeit more stealthily now, since the Omnitrix needs time to recharge after fixing Ken, and they don't have enough ID masks for all of them. Thanks to Ken's knowledge as a former DNA alien, they know exactly where Grandpa Max is being kept, and after slipping in and freeing him from the weird organic chains holding him, the old plumber shares a hug with his two younger grandchildren. Feeling too ashamed to join them after what he did, Ken stays back, while trying to stammer out a plea for his grandfather's forgiveness, though smiling that he's just glad he's safe, Max pulls him into the embrace as well. As for Kevin, he offers him the respectful handshake of one partner to another, stating that he's done a great job in his absence. Bashfully, Kevin apologizes for not coming after him sooner, though Max smiles that he has nothing to apologize for. If anything, he should be the one apologizing to Kevin and the kids for not contacting them or coming home, but he was worried that he had a DNA alien tail, so it was safer for everyone if he went dark and brought the fight to the Highbreed when they were least expecting it. Smiling eagerly, Ben states but now he can come home with them, though nothing can be so simple, as at that moment a PA sounds, announcing the start of Project DNA, with the team rushing to a nearby window to witness in horror as hundreds of DNA aliens load thousands of those Xenocides into a fleet of trucks, which will spread them all across the country. Knowing they can't allow this, Max instructs the kids to stop those trucks from leaving while he tracks down the egg machines so they can't make any more of those creepy crawlies. At once, the three grandchildren nod, always willing to put their faith in Grandpa Max, though Kevin protests he's not about to leave his partner again. Looking him squarely in the eye, Max reminds him that he is a sworn officer of the plumbers, so he needs to keep leading this team like he has been so far. And out of respect for the man before him and the badge they both carry, Kevin relents and promises to make Max proud. Smiling softly, the older man states that he always does. Then with nothing more to say, the two teams split up. Heading down to the parking lot where the trucks are waiting, Kevin wastes no time in turning himself into concrete and using sledgehammer fists to begin smashing any DNA aliens who stand in his way. Meanwhile, Ben transforms into Jet Ray, with his flight, speed, and neuroblast proving incredibly useful as he rains pain down upon his enemies from above. However, neither of them can hold a candle to Gwen, as channeling all her frustration at the kidnapping of her loved ones and now the threat to everything she holds dear, she unleashes a magical barrage that torches the whole fleet of vehicles and the DNA aliens assembled, much to Ben and Kevin's amazement as they share a wordless promise to never make her that mad at either of them. Though now is hardly the time for such thoughts, as spotting several flashes of light in another part of the hatchery, they all rush inside, with it not taking much to conclude this is the egg machine Grandpa Max was talking about, as they see a techno-organic tube extruding several of the foul things onto a pile of hundreds, suggesting it will take very little to undo what felt like a major victory for them. Were that not bad enough, the Highbreed commander is also here locked in combat with Grandpa Max, and capitalizing on the old man's momentary distraction at seeing his family, the monster grabs him and demands their surrender, or it will crush the life out of him. However, this just makes Max smirk, as he states that he figured it might end this way, though if he's gotta go, he's taking the Highbreed and the egg machine with him. He then orders Gwen to put up a shield around herself and the boys before snapping the focusing emitter off his null void projector, as now all that raw energy will have nowhere to go, turning into a hand grenade that'll flatten everything for half a mile. Haughtily, the Highbreed sneers that the human vermin wouldn't sacrifice his own life so willingly. Though looking it firmly in the eye, Max replies that he would for his family. Knowing his grandpa is telling the truth, Ben cries out for him to stop, though when he tries to run to him, Kevin and Ken remorsefully hold him back, allowing Gwen to bring up the shield like she was told. Now that the kids are safe, there is nothing to stop Max, and so after telling each of them that he loves them, he presses the button and is gone in a flash of light. As he had said, everything for half a mile is gone when the light fades, with Gwen's magic having been the only thing to spare the team that fate. Naturally, all of them are devastated, as they never imagined it could end like this, though they are likewise filled with a new resolve. They aren't going to let Grandpa Max's sacrifice be in vain, so they'll finish what he started and stop this invasion, no matter the cost. And that's where we'll leave things for now. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave your thoughts, suggestions, or screams of rage in the comments below.